Church. We are in the middle of a series titled Quittin Religion, and it's really built on this framework and this thought. Jesus' resurrection is our invitation to quit religion. So because Jesus has defeated death, because he is walking alive, we have the freedom to move away from the rules and the rituals and the regulations that so many of us grew up with as kids that in many ways have impacted the way that we see the world, or maybe even disenchanted us with following Jesus in the first place. And so when I talk about religion, this is what I mean. Religion is a set of beliefs built on rules, rituals, and rejection. And last week we talked about the fact that for many of us, we had to grow up rejecting one of two things. Either I'm going to reject what I can see with my mind, what I can study through science, or I'm going to have to reject the faith of my childhood. And what we talked about is that Jesus invites us into a different way, that there is a way for us to have an adult faith that allows there to be room for our wondering, allows us to embrace the scientific method, and in the midst of that, actually see God do some incredible things. And today, we're going to talk about something that I think impacts us as individuals or impacts somebody that we love. Because most people I know are cool with Jesus, that Jesus is not the issue that they have as it pertains to faith. In fact, the thing that makes it hardest for them to believe really has very little to do with Jesus. It has everything to do with the people that say they love Jesus. I mean the church, all right? And so here's what I mean. Maybe you felt this way before. This is the tension that I feel. While it's easy to love Jesus, it can be hard to trust his church. Can I get a good amen if that's true, right? Yeah, a good head nod, right? That for many of us, including me, we've had experiences in church and experience with church people that seems polar opposite of the way of Jesus, the person. And when Jesus people don't align with the person of Jesus, it can create a degree of tension in our heart. We've been wounded, we've been hurt, we've been let down, we've been offended, we've been even abused, some of us, by the ways in which our church traditions have thought about faith and really executed that faith. And for me, this isn't just a kind of theoretical idea. This is a very real part of my story and my experience as a person. I was talking to somebody who I love very, very much just this week about kind of the process of exploring church. And she shared with me the reality that when she was 18 years old and found out that she was pregnant, people in the church that she was a part of came to her and said, hey, you can no longer be involved in any church activities. I know that you used to sing, you can no longer sing. I know that you used to be involved in, student ministry. You can't be involved in student ministry. You're not allowed to talk to people at church, particularly young people, because it is very clear that you are pregnant and we cannot have that kind of reality in our church. Now, while all this was going on, the person who got her pregnant, because it takes two to tango, did you know that, right? It takes two people. He was the lead worship leader of the church, and he was playing piano. And because he did not have a belly that would communicate that he was carrying a child, that he had anything to do with it, he got to maintain his position of leadership in the church while she was effectively kicked out of her faith community. And the toxicity of this wasn't just about how she related to church people, because those church people were also a part of her family. And the way that they were taking cues about how you relate to somebody who has had a child out of the context of marriage impacted the way that she was treated by her very own family. A lot of pain resulted because of those conversations and because of the way they treated her. And that 18-year-old person was my mother, and I was the mistake that was in her belly. And I think often about the journey that our family has gone through as it pertains to church, about the pain that my mom had to go through, about what she must have felt when we moved to Northern California and I was about 3 or 4 years old, and her new husband who she had married looked at each other and said, hey, we need to go to church. And I can imagine the stress and the anxiety that my mom must have felt the first time she went to a church and checked me into kids ministry and sat in a room similar to this, wondering, what do the people around me think about me? And what's true about my mom's story, what's true about your story, is that this is not something that I would say is unique. In fact, a study was done just a couple of years ago looking at people that no longer go to church. And George Barna, who's a world-renowned researcher, found this, that 37% about 4 out of 10. 37% of unchurched people, meaning people that no longer go to church or do not go to church, fall in the category of being wounded ex-churched. Meaning for every person that doesn't go to church, 4 out of those 10 no longer go to church because of a bad experience that they've had with people, because of the wounding messages that they have received, or because of the way that they have been treated. And that's not just the reality around the world. It is a very, very real reality in our city. In fact, it is worse in our city. It's worse in Central Florida. You may not know this, but you live in the 9th most unchurched region of America and the 6th most de-churched part of the country as well. And what that means when you hear the word de-church means there are people that went to church, were engaged in church, were involved in church, and walked away from church. And of the people that do that, an overwhelming majority of them, the research shows about 51%, 1 out of every 2 person in our city is not in church today on a Sunday because of a poor experience they have had with church people at some point in their life. And I don't know about you, but I love people and I love Jesus and I love the church. And when I see statistics like this, my heart breaks. So I want you to know, if you find yourself in this category, if you're a part of the 37%, I want to say thank you so much for trusting us with your time. Coming to church today may have been a simple act of courage on your part, and I want to say thank you for trusting Nona with an hour and change of your life, for trusting us with your kids, because we know that there's significant amounts of pain that come with that decision to be here, and we are so, so grateful. I also want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that people like me that do what I do and are in positions like I'm in, or people that say that they're a part of church have said some of the most harsh, hurtful, painful things imaginable, have asked you to serve and engage and be involved, and really have used you as opposed to serve you and love you. And if you're a part of that and you're a part of our church and you're here today, I want you to know that here at Nona, you can go as fast as you want and as slow as you need. That your pain is real, that your hurt is a true experience, and we want to be a safe place for you to process that and work that out so that you can re-engage with the life-giving message of Jesus. And so today, what I want to do is I want to talk to 2 people. I want to talk to those of us that were courageous enough to come to church today who are wounded. This message is for you. But I also want to acknowledge that for the majority of people that feel this way, they're not in church today. They're not in any church today. They're at home, maybe watching something online. They're at home discovering something else, maybe walked away from God. So many people I talk to have walked away from Jesus because of their experience with Jesus, people that they're not even sure if they believe. And so as much as I want to talk to those of us who have been wounded today, I really want to talk to those of us who are a part of Nona Church today, because you and I have the responsibility to create a space and an environment where those who have been wounded by the church have a place where they can belong. And it is not simply my job to do that. It is our responsibility to do it together. Because here's what I know, okay? Here's what I know, is that for as many conversations that I have with people, the way that you relate to people and we relate to people is really what church is about. Our church is not built on the talent of a few people. Our church is built on the contributions of many. And we've got some decisions to make, church, about how we're going to live, about how we're going to love, about how we're going to respond so that we can be the kind of place that serves as a safe haven for those in our community who are working this thing out. So here's the question we're going to ask today. How can we build a church that is healthy for the wounded 37%? How can we build a church that's healthy for the wounded 51% in our city? Because here's the challenge. Our church will only be as healthy as we are because we are the church. In fact, would you say that with me on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. We are the church. So Paul, who we looked at last week, is going to give us some really great insights this week about what it looks like to be a part of and to contribute to a healthy church culture. But before we get there, I want to look at some words that Jesus' best friend John writes to a church that we're going to read about today about how they finished. And here's what I think is so important, is that how a church starts is not necessarily how a church finishes. And unfortunately, the church that we're going to look at, the church of Ephesus, started really well. In fact, the church at Ephesus felt and looked a lot like the church at Nona today. But how they finished is not the way they should have finished. Look at what John writes as he's kind of interpreting Jesus' words to the church at Ephesus later on in their life. After they've stopped being, set up and tear down, they finally, got a facility and they've got all the ministries and they've been around for a long time and they're establishing their community. Look at how Jesus thinks about this church. We find this. I know your deeds, your hard work and your perseverance. Anybody say those are two great things for a church to be about, hard work and perseverance, right? Yeah. I know that you can't tolerate wicked people, that you've tested those who claim to be apostles but are not and have found them false. Here meaning you've got really good theology, you're hardworking, you're persevering, you know your Bible. You have persevered, verse 3, and have endured hardships for my name. That sounds like a great church, isn't it? A church that's willing to go through hard things. And in this day and context, we're talking about losing your life for following Jesus. The people that were connected to the church at Ephesus had far more to lose than we could ever fathom or imagine. These are incredible things. And you have not grown weary. Would anyone say that sounds like a pretty great church? Like that sounds like a legacy church, doesn't it? That sounds like a church I'd want to check my kids into. Except this is where they fell short. Look what Jesus says. Yet I hold this against you. You have forsaken the love you had at first. And for so often, I thought that love was their love for Jesus. But we know that that's actually not the case because this is a hardworking, persevering, connected to the scriptures, believing church. You don't do that unless you love Jesus. The love that's mentioned here is their love for one another. What you have lost over the years, what you have let go over the years, church, is your care, compassion, and love for the people in your city and for the people that are a part of your church, which leads us to this truth. A church can be right, but be wrong if people don't walk with love. And I would say that's probably been your experience. For some of us who have experienced church hurt, maybe we were a part of a church where the preaching was great and the ministry was good, but the reality is that there was not love, or that the love was lost, or the way that we were treated was in a way that wasn't loving or compassionate. And the result of that is pain that we carry. So look here, I think this is super important, okay? The goal of the local church is to love one another well like Jesus has loved us. So today, I want to talk about what a healthy church looks like. And I'm going to look at the words that Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus, where he essentially says, if you do this, you will maintain your love. If you do this, you will be the kind of church that places a smile on the heart of God. And as I get there, I want you to recognize that I'm going to be talking to two groups of people simultaneously. Some of you I'm talking to today, man, church has been hard for you. You have been wounded. And in these four principles, you actually find your pathway home and your path to healing. And for those of us that are church people that are creating a community here at Nona, these are the commitments we've got to make as a church family to make sure that we do not contribute to the pain that people are already experiencing as it pertains to church. And here's the reality. Okay, I kind of want to take something off the table for all of us that for some of us we would just kind of lean into here. It is impossible to love Jesus and not love his church. Anybody say, I'd love to just kind of live that way, right? Can I love Jesus but not deal with his church, right? Like, wouldn't you just take that? Absolutely. But here's the problem, is that Jesus really loves his church. In fact, Jesus calls his church his bride. It is his wifey, all right? He is in love with his church. And just to kind of put this on the ground, you can't love me and not love my wife, Stacy, right? Like you can't come to my house, eat my food, hang out with me, watch college football, and never talk to my wife. Like that's not gonna work, right? You can't eat my nachos and not thank my wife, right? You can't speak bad about my wife or wonder, how is my wife spending all her money? It doesn't seem like she's spending it right. Like those types of conversations are not going to be okay with me because if you love me, you love my wife. And if you love Jesus, you have to love the church. You cannot divorce the two. Jesus doesn't give us that option. So how do we love a church that is hard to love? And how do we create a church that we all can love? Paul tells us as he writes this letter to the church in Ephesus. And here's what we're going to find today, is that a healthy church is honest. Write this down in your notes. A healthy church is honest. Look at what Paul says, okay? There's this whole chapter 4 is all about church. He says this, so stop telling lies. Anybody say that would be a good thing for church people not to do? Like stop lying, right? Stop pretending things are better than they actually are. We all know what's actually going on, right? Just be honest and be real. So stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all part of the same body. So here's what honest people do, okay? Honest people own their stuff. Honest people walk vulnerably, and honest people tell the truth in love. Sometimes we live in this kind of dichotomy in church, that there are churches that are all about love and never about truth, and there are churches that are all about truth and never about love. And if a church isn't both of those things, it really isn't functioning as the church that God has intended. We've got to live lives where we are open and honest, and I'll be honest, it starts with me. It starts with this recognition and this admission on my part and on all of our parts that there is no one who is greater in our community. Just because a person has a microphone does not mean that they don't have issues. And I've got to be honest with that and commit to be honest about the life that I'm living, the life that we're living as a family, because the last thing that should happen is for church people to think that particular people have it put together and particular people don't. And you've got to be honest with others too. You got to be honest in community group. This is why I love Known to Men on Tuesday mornings, because it's a group of guys that are getting together to be honest about their lives so that they can heal, so that they can grow. It's why we say all of the time that church isn't just what happens in rows, but life really changes in circles, in the context of community, where you can be known and where you can know other people. And so today, I'm going to give you 4 very, very cheesy rhymes that are essential commitments that we need to make that will help us move forward, all right? So here's the first one. God will only heal what I am willing to reveal. So let me ask you this question. Are you living honestly? Christian, are you living a life that is honest about what's going on? Or are you acting in a way that you are better than the people around you, that you've got things figured out that you don't have figured out? Are you the person in group that's always got advice but never asks or lives a vulnerable life? And here's what I need you to know, okay? No, we don't expect you to be vulnerable with everybody, okay? That's weird and you don't need to do that, all right? Here's what we do want you to do though. We want you to be vulnerable with someone. Not everyone doesn't have to know everything about you, but someone should know. Someone who you trust should know, so they can be the person who speaks truth and love to you. A healthy church is going to be committed to telling the truth at every single level. Here's the second thing. A healthy church is forgiving. A healthy church is forgiving. Look at verse 26 and 27. He says this, don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. So Ethan, come on up here. And while Ethan's coming up here, I want you to write this down in your notes, because this is a principle that will change your life. Unresolved anger is the quickest way to give the enemy control over your life. And when you and I live lives that do not extend forgiveness, where we do not forgive quickly, we give the enemy an opportunity to what the New Testament calls and what Paul calls a stronghold or a foothold. And to explain that today, Ethan's going to help me out. Can you put your hands together for Mr. Ethan? Speak, everybody. So here's the reason why I picked Ethan, okay? A couple of reasons. Number one, Ethan has a better beard than I do, which makes him stronger, all right? Secondly, Ethan is taller than me, which makes me really sad. Thirdly, Ethan can dunk a basketball, which I've not been able to do now for 13 years. And every time he does it, it's just a painful reminder that he's more athletic than I am. And fourthly, Ethan, before he was on staff at our church, before he was a guy who was in ministry, he was a professional physical trainer, which is part of the reason I hired him, so he could take care of me. And so that's why Ethan is here. Okay, can we all agree that Ethan is stronger and taller? We all agree with this, right? Yes, okay? So if we were in a fight, right? If we were in a fight, the way that it would work is I would hit Ethan and I would run away and hope that Jesus stopped him, right? That's what I would hope would happen. So here's the idea of a foothold, okay? The idea of a foothold or a stronghold is this. Ethan, go ahead and turn around. It's the phrase stronghold really means strategic hold. That's what it means. So here's the thing. Ethan's stronger than me. He can bench more than me. He does CrossFit and tells everybody about it because he's that kind of guy, all of that. Now, here's what I want you to know, okay, about a stronghold. A stronghold gives somebody who is weaker the advantage over someone who is stronger. And this is what the scripture's telling us, that the devil has a stronghold every time you have unresolved anger. He can push you around and make you do what he wants you to do, even when you try. So why don't you just grip, be strong. Good, ready? Watch this. I'm still stronger. Good job. Thank you, Ethan. Round of applause. I hope that is seared into your brain for all of the right reasons, all right? When you and I choose unforgiveness, when you and I do not resolve the anger that we hold towards others that have hurt us, either in our church or in the churches in the past or the religious traditions of the past that we're bringing with us. We bring all of that baggage into the next setting, and we never experience the freedom that God wants for us, and we actually give the enemy a stronghold in our life, and we become an instrument in his hands. And maybe you're not a follower of Jesus, or you don't buy into the whole, enemy devil thing. Like, that's cool. Like, you don't have to believe that right now. But I promise you this, the principle still remains the same. You're still controlled by your unforgiveness, and it makes you miss out on the beauty of life. Stephen Mansfield writes it this way. He says this: the more you rehearse the wrongs against you, and the more you stay in that trap of offense, the more the syringes of bitterness release their toxins into your soul. So here's what choosing not to forgive does, okay? It prevents your personal peace. You carry around this restlessness in your soul. It stops you from celebrating what God is doing right now. You see things that are happening at Nona Church, and they're super exciting, but you can't celebrate them because there's too much pain from your past for you to be able to engage in it. And there are people all around you that are excited about what God is doing, and yet there's skepticism and cynicism in your soul because you have yet to forgive. And because you have not forgiven, you are not experiencing the life that God wants for you. It ruins your ability to find real friendships because you're always gauging people based upon your previous experience. So I want to challenge you today, and I want to challenge us every day to be a church that forgives, because I'm going to let you down. Our staff is going to let you down. Your community group's going to let you down. The people you serve with are going to let you down. You are going to be hurt because we are broken people. The church is not a country club where everyone is pious. It's a hospital where everyone's broken. You put a bunch of broken people in a room together. You put a bunch of broken people in relationship together over years, and guess what's going to happen? You're going to experience pain. And just because you experience pain does not mean that God is not at work or that God is not for you, because that pain you're experiencing might be the means by which God actually teaches you forgiveness so you can recognize how much you've been forgiven by him. So how do I forgive? I want to actually help you do this, okay? Identify, this is the key word, who hurt you. Because here's what I know from the most of us. The church didn't hurt you. The church is not a person. Somebody in the church did. Some leader did. Some friend did, or former friend did. Some relationship did. Identify who hurt you. Stop saying it was the church. It wasn't. It was a person or a group of people. Who hurt you? Here's the second thing. Name the pain you feel. Oh, well, I'm angry. No. Angry is a secondary emotion. I feel betrayed. I feel rejected. I feel taken advantage of. Name the pain. And then thirdly, release them to God. Ask God, the same way that he took on your shame and your guilt, to take on the shame and guilt of that person, and trust that God is going to do what is best for them the same way God is doing what is best for you. And then finally, move on. Rehashing old stories, bringing it back up over and over and over again is going to serve no one, and it is not going to help you. And here's a great litmus test if you know if you've actually forgiven, okay? Can you celebrate the success of the person that hurt you when you hear about their success? That's how you know if you've forgiven or not. One of the things that I struggle with, and again, right, I'm all about honesty, and if you don't like my level of honesty, there are places you can go that are not as honest. And so I'm just going to tell you something that I feel sometimes, okay? Sometimes I have this dream that I'm going to be at a coffee shop, and all of the people that have hurt me and wronged me and wounded me and lied about me and said things about me that were not true and taken advantage of me, they are going to stand outside. They're going to come and sit across from me at the coffee table. They're going to own the mistakes that they have made. They're going to ask for my forgiveness, and in a power of great power and mercy, I am going to extend forgiveness to them. Have you ever had that thought before? Or have you ever rehearsed in your mind what you're going to tell your boss, and you find that you're speaking to an empty room? Or you get in an argument, or somebody hurts you and you walk away, and 3 minutes later, you got that comeback gets in your mind. You're like, oh, why did I have that 3 minutes before? If any version of those things exist when you think about people that have hurt you, it is an indicator that you have not actually forgiven them. Because forgiveness is freeing them to God and trusting that the God who loves you is the God who will take care of you and take care of them. And that doesn't mean you need to go back. And it doesn't mean that you need to go reconcile the relationship. And it doesn't mean you need to be best friends again. You don't have to step back into somebody else's toxicity just to deal with it. You can walk away from it and know that you're free. Just make sure that you're free because you've actually freed them from the offense. Here's why this is important. Forgiveness is not about the other person's freedom. It is about yours. And God will not free us until we free those who hurt us. So here's the second rhyme of the day. I will never be set free until I free who hurt me. So have you given forgiveness? Extend it today. Let it go and walk into the freedom that God has for your life. It is so much better. Here's the third thing. A healthy church is invested. Verse 28 says this, if you are a thief, quit stealing. Instead, use your hands for good hard work and then give generously to others in need. This is what Paul's saying. Remember, this is to the church. He's saying to church people, if you have the ability to make a difference and contribute in your local church and you are not doing it, he calls you a thief and a robber, all right? So I'm right now not calling you a thief and a robber. Paul is calling you a thief and a robber. If you have any problems with what I'm about to say over the next few moments, I understand that. I would be a little bit offended too. Email paul@nonachurch.com, all right? He'll take care of it. But here's what you need to know, okay? Gosh, I want you to get this, okay? Because a healthy church culture involves people that are invested. Christians steal when they don't contribute, when they treat church as a restaurant instead of a potluck, meaning they come, they listen, they maybe leave a tip, and they evaluate it based upon what it did for them. Whereas a potluck is we all bring something to the table and everybody brings something, whether or not it's the forks or the ham. We all need everybody to make a difference. And Christians steal when they're insider-focused and outsider-driven. So I want to just stop here. If you've been wounded by the church, this is not a call for you to go serve in kids' ministry today. That's not what I'm asking you to do. If you've been wounded in church, you are welcome to be here as long as you need to be and to take your steps in finding a way to rebuild trust again. We're never going to ask you or force you or drive you to do anything that you don't feel God is inviting you to do. But I do want to talk to Christians in the room right now who have been at our church for a season of time, who are not wounded and who are just choosing not to engage. And I want you to recognize this. Paul says you're a thief, that you're robbing from the church and you're robbing from God, that your unwillingness to engage and your unwillingness to make a difference in the local church is actually contributing to the church hurt of the people around you. You are hurting people by not contributing. Christians who don't contribute rob the church, but they're also the worst critics because they think it's about them. The attitude quickly becomes about what I get instead of what I can give. And we forget that there's a whole city that needs to know Jesus. There are communities right now. There are moms that are praying for somebody to enter into the life of their teenage kid. There are women who are praying for their marriage to be restored. There are men who are single, who are wondering how they're going to walk through this life. There are people who are differently abled. There are people of a variety of different perspectives looking for a place to belong. And your unwillingness to engage is preventing them from finding that place. You also take advantage of those who are making a difference. So often, the people that burn out in church and feel wounded by church are the people who served so long in the local church and felt that they could not stop serving and sacrifice their family and sacrifice their energy and sacrifice their mental health because while they were serving, you were taking. And you were not helping. And your unwillingness to help actually causes pain in your brother or sister's life. And if you're not a follower of Jesus, this is not for you. If you're a wounded follower of Jesus and it was a courageous step to be at church today, this is not for you. But if you are a person who woke up today and said, I'm going to go to church and didn't think about how you can contribute to your local body, if it's not here, find a place. But I love you too much to not be honest with you. You are hurting the local church and you're contributing to the pain of others when you do not invest. So here's the third rhyme of the day. I will only feel connected to the degree I am invested. Are you actively involved in your local community of faith? Bring your gifts to the table and make a difference. And finally, healthy church is honoring. The verse here in verse 29, he says, don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. So hear this, how we speak to one another and how we speak about one another is evidence of the health of our heart. That the culture of honor is a culture that acknowledges you are created and designed by God, and because of that, you deserve my respect. You deserve my best. You deserve my best intentions and my belief in you that you are doing your best. And the quickest way to destroy a great church is to allow gossip to enter into the story and allow the way that we speak about each other to be negative and dishonoring. Look at Romans 12:10 and what Paul says to that church. He says, love each other, meaning what he's going to say next is how you love. Love each other with genuine affection and take delight. Find joy. Let this be your motivation in honoring each other. Live a life that honors the people around you. So automatically scoot in so that guests have a place to sit. Automatically park a little bit further away so that guests have a place to park. Automatically think about saying hi to somebody, having a smile on your face because you might be the first interaction they have with at church. Think about how to honor those around you and be careful with your speech. Perhaps one of the greatest theologians of the 21st century, Jennifer Stoltzfus, says this: what Sally says about Susie tells me more about Sally than it does Susie. I think she's right. When we gossip, when we tear down, when we speak negatively about people instead of bringing that issue or frustration to them, we contribute to the kind of culture that might be rich in theology, rich in impact, but low in love. And the church that is low in love is the church that kills and wounds those around us. So here's the fourth rhyme of the day. When people come to mind, will I choose to be kind? Are you choosing honor? Listen, there are going to be things that happen at this church, Christian, that you don't like. Are you going to choose to be honoring? There are going to be things that happen in your community group that are offensive. Are you going to choose to be honoring? There are things that are going to happen that do not make sense. Are you going to choose to be honoring? These are the kind of signs and marks of a church that's healthy and a place that can host and be a safe haven to those that are wounded. And that is why we're here. So Paul closes by saying this: and do not bring sorrow to God's Holy Spirit by the way you live. You and I grieve the heart of God when we don't live like this. Remember, he has identified you as his own, guaranteeing that you will be saved on the day of redemption. So get rid of all bitterness and rage and anger and harsh words and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, look at this, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another just as God through Christ has forgiven you. Our collective commitment to honesty, forgiveness, investment, and honor will keep our church healthy. And it takes every single one of us. So maybe today you find yourself and you're like, hey, I would love to be a part of that kind of church. I just don't think that church exists. Because if you knew my story and if you knew my pain and if you knew how I was treated, you would understand why I have a hard time trusting the church. And I would say, welcome home. Stay for as long as you need. Go as slow as you want to and as fast as you can. You are welcome here. And we're thankful that you would trust us with that journey. And I've actually bought a resource for you today. If you're like, I really need some help. There's a book that was really helpful for me called Healing Your Church Hurt in my own life, written by Stephen Mansfield. And I've got a couple of copies here. And so if you want to pick up a copy, feel free to grab one from me. If it's something that you can't afford to purchase on your own, I'll give that to you today as a gift. But maybe you're like, no, I'm past that process. I've moved towards forgiveness. Then I would encourage you to step into this next space and say, I want to learn more. It's time to learn more about this church. It's time to learn about how you can get engaged. So fill out your Connect card and join us at the New to Nona Dessert and Coffee, where you can get under the hood of our church, ask any question you want, hear about where we're going, and be a part of this community of faith. Or maybe it's time for you to invest. It's time for you to engage in the local church and make a difference, and maybe this is a place for you to do it. If you're ready to invest, then fill out your Connect card and join us at Discover Nona. It's our entry and pathway into membership here, which allows you to learn more about how you can make a contribution and how we will serve you as you and your family connect here in knowing and taking your next best step and following Jesus.